Hi everybody, my name is Lydiah Namayengo. Nice to catch up with you again. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I want us to talk about conflict and electoral violence. Currently in Uganda we are undergoing an election and we've seen so many people being killed, others being shot by either the police or the military, either rubber bullets or live bullets or even tear gas in an election, where even other people have actually been able to lose lives. But what is conflict? Conflict is basically a disagreement between two or more parties about a given idea or given opinion or something. But what can we mean? What do we mean by violence? Violence is basically the use of excessive force over somebody because of a disagreement. A disagreement is a conflict. But then violence is where you can use physical force or even torture to ensure that you can inflict harm or pain or torture or even injure on somebody. What causes violence in elections? Electoral violence has become the norm of the day, the talk of the day. Currently in Uganda, we have seen so many cases of electoral violence. And most of these things are actually cases that have happened because of the events that are happening right now, which could be the triggers of conflict and violence, or actually some others have actually come because of the existing factors that have been existing before. One of the things that causes violence in an election is basically poor service delivery by government. When citizens do not get services that they desire, for example, good health facilities, quality education, good schools, well-paid teachers, they end up getting into violence in elections because they do not have the services that they desire. Secondly, the other thing is actually lack of peaceful transfer of power. Whenever leaders get to overstay in power, citizens get tired of their leadership when they keep staying in power. And because they have failed to peacefully transfer power from either to another, they engage into violence. Then number 3 is about high competition among candidates in a given campaign or an election. Wherever there is a lot of competition among different candidates, especially when there is competition over a government in power that could sometimes be overthrown for another leader to come into power, there could be violence because of the insecurities by the government in power and because of their fear to lose power as leaders. And then the other thing is about police brutality. Wherever the police comes to intervene in an election campaign, whenever the police comes to intervene in the meetings of different candidates in a campaign election, in an election, sometimes they end up bringing about violence. Citizens would always want to interact with their candidates when there's no police. But whenever police comes in and exerts pressure over them, it ends up bringing about violence. And sometimes you could also look at continuous human rights abuse. There are so many cases where people's human rights have been abused. If people have been tortured for a very long time, if people have not been able to access jobs, people have not been able to access rights, sometimes they may be able to engage into violence. Then the other thing is discrimination in employment, discrimination in promotion, discrimination in candidates, discrimination in campaign time. All these kinds of things pile up conflicts among the people that automatically end up becoming violence. Now, at some point, you'll also realize that poor communication and rigidity or arrogance and pride among the leaders of the government in power sometimes could cause violence. If a leader from a government in power, maybe from the Ministry of Security, comes up on national television and says words that are actually irritating to some people, that are actually using use of threats and intimidation, they could be able to cause violence. Now, what can be done to ensure that we can be able to run away or prevent election violence? One of the things that we can be able to do as citizens, as leaders, as key stakeholders in an election to prevent violence is basically to withdraw from a conflict or a violent situation. Withdrawing from a conflict or a violent situation is very important for you to prevent violence. For example, there could be cases where some conflicts are not necessary, they are unimportant conflicts. If a conflict is not important, for instance, discussing whether Katumba is more handsome than Mayambala, you could actually prevent such a conflict in situation to bring about violence. And also, you could also decide to shut down entirely and not say anything in a given situation. If, for example, different candidates are discussing about their manifestos, they're discussing different things, and you feel you're not comfortable with them, please shut down and keep quiet and do not engage in that discussion. Then you could also avoid conflict or run away from violence by ensuring that you engage key stakeholders, social peace building. Let us continue to build peace among the different areas. The other thing is political party engagement. Political parties and candidates need to be engaged in peace building. In most cases, some of the violence starts within the political parties, and then the other violence actually happens outside the political parties. If FDC supporters come and attack NUP supporters, then violence will be able to occur. Then the other thing is also about ensuring that you can go ahead and have accommodation. We sometimes need to learn as people, as citizens, to accommodate each other. No matter how irritating supporters of the NRM may be, no matter how irritating supporters of the FDC may be, can we sometimes accept to listen to them and accommodate and live with them? So the other thing is about collaboration. We need to also learn how to collaborate with one another. No matter whether your husband supports a different political party and you also support a different political party, let's agree to disagree within a peaceful manner. Let's not promote violence in an election. And the other thing could be about compromise. We need to ensure that we can sometimes win in given situations and other times we may not be able to win. So for you to be able to understand that at this point, I can be able to understand that this person from the NRM is actually taking up this position is okay for you as a supporter of the FDC or and. We also need to ensure that we can actually engage in passing over peaceful messages in an election. Let's pass over peaceful messages as much as we can. Peaceful messages are very key in an election. Let's not spread violence. Let's not spread threats. Let us not spread intimidation. Spread peace and peace and peace. For example, you could say peace is in our hands. For example, you can say peace starts with me and you. For example, we would say elections are not the end of the world, because remember, elections are going to be over by February and Uganda is going to stay. So we need to ensure that we actually spread these messages. We also need to ensure that we can be able to conduct so much civic awareness among the community and human rights awareness. Civic education is very key for people to understand their different roles and responsibilities. Sometimes candidates end up doing roles of their political parties. Sometimes a government in power ends up doing roles of a political party. So we need to be able to understand that. We also need to ensure that we can reinstate term limits and age limits, probably to ensure that we can reduce on the leaders who want to overstay in power, or maybe the leaders who want to die in power. And then we also need to ensure that we can practice political tolerance. Let us tolerate one another. No matter what political party you believe in, no matter which candidate you support, no matter who you actually worship and talk to every now and then, tolerate one another's ideas, because that is what multi-party democracy requires us to do. As we get to wind up this video, I want to tell you one thing. Life has no spare, so we should keep it jealously. I want to remind you that nobody deserves to die in an election. I also want to remind you that elections are not the end of the world. I also want to remind you that peace starts with you as a person. Engaging and maintaining peace in an election requires all of us as key stakeholders. No matter whether you're coming from the media, no matter whether you're coming from the political parties, government, or all different sectors of the society, peace begins with you. Maintain peace in an election. Nobody deserves to die in an election. I thank you.